Another story that we've been following that I think is super, super interesting. I'm going to put it up on the screen for people so they can see it as we talk about it here. Victor Woman says racial bias has followed her and her boyfriend, Derek McNeil, since moving to Victor last year. McNeil was coming home from work last week, and he was stopped by deputies. He was put through a series of field sobriety tests. It was about 1:30 in the morning. He works construction. The car was stripped of its plates. He was threatened jail time. Nothing was found. The only issues that were basically found through this entire stop was that the registration and insurance couldn't be found. It was the vehicle was both registered and insured, but because it was his girlfriend's car and he was driving back with friends to work on his own vehicle at her home, he didn't know where it was in the car, so they took the plates off of it, took off. The whole stop took place literally right in their driveway. The cops didn't knock on the door, didn't seek her out to get an answer on, why does this person, if you think it's suspicious, why does this person have your vehicle or is driving your vehicle at 1:30 in the morning? None of that happened. So the next day, she sends the sergeant that's on staff in the morning with the sheriff's office a picture of all of the documentation that they needed, and they said everything was cleared up. Obviously, these two individuals don't feel like everything is cleared up. They feel like this is systemic. This is an issue. This is something that they've seen happen over and over and over again. Victor is a community that's roughly 95% white. Mm-hmm. It raises a lot of interesting questions, but my big questions was afterward, what does this actually clear up? To say that, well, we aren't ticketing you, we aren't charging you with anything. That doesn't seem to cut it.
No.
Right?
No. I mean, it would be great if after one of these incidents, obviously it would be great if there were none of these incidents, but look at what's happening. They're continuing to happen. It would be nice if at some point after one of these incidents, someone would stand up and say, you know what? You're right. Like, we are treating people with a heightened suspicion, or we are having a heightened sense of fear based on people's skin color. And there's no more denying it. I think if that has not been the lesson of 2018, the lesson of 2017, the lesson of the century, but it's time for police departments, in order to maintain a sense of legitimacy in their communities, to say that there is an undeniable pattern of heightened suspicion and disparate treatment. Like this, I don't know, we've talked about this before, that there have been situations. There was a situation in Seneca County, in Border City, a year and a half ago, where a white man came out and confronted police officers with a gun. It was the front page picture on the Finger Lakes Times of the officers responding appropriately, calming down the situation, talking to him, getting the gun, making an arrest. That is not the scene that we have seen involving people of color.
Yeah, and I look at it kind of through that, well, how would be the best way to handle this individual situation? Well, it seems like this is your golden opportunity, if you're ever going to have one, to it's training opportunity. Take it. Learn from this particular incident so that you don't have future incidents that are like it.
Right.
You have to, at some point, whether you admit you have a problem or not, you have to do something so that the same thing doesn't keep happening over and over again.
Right.
Whether the admission comes later after the training is completed and after, change is visible from the outside, in my mind, doesn't matter as much as the real change matters.
Yeah. And it's a measurement issue, right? Because, the police department could come back and say, actually, across stops of a similar nature, this is exactly how we've treated every single driver, regardless of race.
Oh, yeah, I mean, which
barring that, then they would say, actually, there are no other drivers we've treated this way. It just so happens the only person we've treated this way is a person of color. Or, again, and then they could say this means if it's a training opportunity, we will then track this over the next year and then report back and tell you how many incidents like this we have again, hopefully none. And if we have any, we're going to let you know the racial background and composition of anybody who was involved in it. Like real accountability, like real transparency with numbers.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because I'm not entirely sure. I mean, right now, the Ontario County Sheriff's Office is going through a transition period as far as leadership goes. Sheriff Pavro is serving out his last few months before he retires. There will be a new sheriff in town, so to speak, in January. And I think really what it comes down to is it's on whoever that person is to sort of take the reins and, say, across the board, I'm pretty sure that even if we take, for 5 seconds, we take race out of the equation, I'm sure we can identify many, many, many different ways that law enforcement can be better and can be improved, not just for those folks in the community who have to deal with them, but also for the sake of those who are doing law enforcement as a career. Just make it better, get better, and put this what is seemed to become it's almost a new story every day of this type of nature where it's just easily preventable. There should be a policy, there should be a procedure, and if the numbers skew a certain way so that you can make that argument that you're saying, then you need to find a new way to handle that situation. You need to find a different way to go down that road. And there again, because this is, supposing that the two officers handled this situation precisely the way they were supposed to, precisely as their supervisors would have expected them to, exactly as the rules of engagement from their perspective should have been followed, it still doesn't... It puts them in a bad spot. Because it's not giving them the right tools, the right resources to be able to do their job the right way, the appropriate way, the effective way. And I think, there again, we hear a lot about community policing. We hear a lot about this. I think that's just another buzzword. When something like this happens, they will point to community policing and say, well, we're doing this, this, and this to be in the community and engage in this very public, dynamic, and public way. Okay. That's pretty much where I am at now with hearing that type of language about it, because I'm not entirely sure that there's enough evidence to say that it's working. It's changing anything. We certainly don't have the data that you've been talking about. So, maybe another couple of years we'll have another conversation about this. Oh, wait, no, it'll probably be 2 or 3 weeks, because that's how frequently these stories pop up.
That's the thing. It's becoming something that people are so used to hearing about that it doesn't even spark the level of outrage that it should. And the thing is, you've got so many people who immediately get defensive and say, well, the police are doing a tough job and, lay off. Well, nobody's saying it's not a tough job. But the point is, why would you want to make it more difficult by having people not getting the training they need to be able to do the job without being criticized for the way it's being handled? If something is so blatantly out of line with general procedure, then that is opening the entire department up for criticism. So it's in the police department's best interest to try and take all of these issues seriously and, meet the needs of the public. I'm not really sure how else to say it.
Yeah, and I think this is, it's worth pointing out that we see this conversation, I think, happen in places like Geneva and Rochester, cities like that, more frequently than we do associated with sheriff's offices or, more rural communities. But I think it's equally a problem across the board and needs to be addressed across the board.